Live NFL trivia every Tuesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge and have a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. We've seen our fair share of upsets in NFL history. The games where it's David against Goliath and David somehow wins it. Things like Super Bowl III, the Jaguars beating the Broncos in the '96 postseason, a Washington team made up of scab players defeating the professional Dallas Cowboys in 1987, and Super Bowl 42 are etched into the history of the NFL forever, and show why the mantra of any given Sunday exists. But there's something with upsets that you don't see a whole lot of. You see, when you think of an upset in NFL history, the odds are that it was a close game. But what about the upset blowout? This is the game where one team is expected to lose big, and they somehow turn the tables and win in dominating fashion. In a 1979 game between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Pittsburgh Steelers, not only did the Bengals somehow manage to stun the defending world champion, but they did it in improbable fashion. And this is the story behind the most surprising blowout in NFL history. Before I talk about the game, we need some context as to why this was such a mismatch to begin with, and why the Bengals winning in such convincing fashion might be the biggest shock in NFL history. Obviously, it comes down to the Steelers being good and the Bengals being bad, but from a historical context, it makes the mismatch that much crazier. Let's start with the team projected to win by double digits, the Pittsburgh Steelers. First off, they're the defending champions. By this point in the 1970s, they had created a dynasty, having won 3 titles in 5 years. They had a ferocious defense known as the Steel Curtain. In 1978, the team had 10 Pro Bowlers in their starting lineup. You could make an argument for the '78 Steelers being the greatest team of all time. Including the postseason, they ended the year on an 8-game winning streak, and followed it up in 1979 by winning their first 4 games and 5 of their first 6. The lone blemish was a Week 5 loss to the Philadelphia Eagles, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Entering this game, the Steelers had won 13 of their last 14 games, and 23 of their last 25. The last time they lost a game by 2 possessions was all the way back on November 6, 1977, when they lost 21-7 to the Denver Broncos. The last time they had truly been blown out and lost a game by 4 or more possessions was December 5, 1971, when they lost 29-3 to the Houston Oilers. That was over 8 years ago, well before the Steelers became respectable. For some perspective on how long ago that was, the very first disco song to hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 was Never Can Say Goodbye by Gloria Gaynor, which hit number 1 in November 1974, 3 years after this game. By the time this 1979 matchup was taking place, disco was dead, as the backlash against the genre, especially in the wake of Disco Demolition Night that summer, was so strong. Basically what I'm saying is that disco was born and died, and then add on a few more years, and in that time frame, the Steelers had never been blown out. You knew this wasn't going to last forever, and that there would eventually be a day where Pittsburgh lost the game in convincing fashion. But it sure as heck wasn't coming from the Cincinnati Bengals. Through 6 weeks, the Bengals were 0-6. They had the worst point differential in the NFL by a healthy margin, having been outscored by 74 points. In one game against the Buffalo Bills, the team that wound up finishing with the 6th worst offense in football that season, they allowed 51 points. They allowed Roland Hooks, a man with 3 career touchdowns in 3 seasons, to score 4 touchdowns on them. Dating back to the end of the 1977 season, the Bengals were going in the complete opposite direction of the Steelers, having lost 19 of their last 23 games. This was a mismatch of epic proportions. In one corner, you had the defending Super Bowl champion and a team that seemingly could not lose. In the other corner, you had the undisputed worst team in football. But wait, it gets worse. You see, Pittsburgh dominated this series throughout the 1970s. Pittsburgh had won 8 of the last 9 meetings dating back to the end of the 1974 season. When the teams met in 1978, not only did the Steelers sweep the season series, but the Bengals didn't score a touchdown in either game. Pittsburgh's defense was that dominant. And if you think that Pittsburgh was maybe vulnerable to a trap game, think again. The last time Pittsburgh lost to a team that finished the season below 500 was coincidentally also on December 5, 1971, against the Houston Oilers. Again, this was well before the Steelers were any good. Now, this stat requires hindsight because you obviously don't know at the time of the game whether or not the team in question will finish the season below 500. But come on, the Bengals were 0-6. For them to not finish below 500, they would have had to pretty much run the table, and no team at that point had ever finished at 500 or better after starting 0-6, or even come close. On average at the time, teams that started 0-6 ended the season winning just 9% of their games. So to make a long story short, the Steelers were not going to lose this one. October 14th, 1979. The AFC Central rivalry between the Steelers and the Bengals is about to get another chapter put into its record book. it's just not the chapter that everyone expected it would be. To say that the result of this game was shocking would be an understatement. It'd be one thing if the Bengals pulled off the upset and won it. That by itself would have been incredible. But the way that it happened almost didn't seem real. The team that exploited the weaknesses of the most powerful dynasty in the game was the worst team in football? After the Steelers jumped out to a 3-0 lead on a 46-yard field goal by Matt Barr, the Bengals scored 34 unanswered points. Yes, you heard that right, 34 unanswered points. They had back-to-back fumble returns for a touchdown in the second quarter, including a stretch where they scored 14 points in 15 seconds. And the craziest stat of them all, Pittsburgh turned the ball over 9 times. Terry Bradshaw threw 2 interceptions and the team lost 7 fumbles, with another 2 fumbles being recovered by Pittsburgh, meaning that they put the ball on the ground more than twice a quarter. It's not even that Cincinnati played a great game. They turned it over 4 times themselves, including on the first play from scrimmage, and actually lost in the yardage battle. But they capitalized on Pittsburgh continuously shooting themselves in the foot. I'm not sure anyone at Riverfront Stadium could believe it when the final whistle sounded and the Bengals walked away with a 34-10 victory, where they led 34-3 before a garbage time touchdown. And yes, that was a 4-possession game back in 1979, since the 2-point conversion did not exist. After the game, Pittsburgh was just confused as to what happened. Terry Bradshaw called the loss embarrassing and said you just laugh and make jokes because you don't want to cry. Joe Green said that this entire game was just a complete lack of concentration. Franco Harris said quite bluntly, you don't get much lower than this. I don't know what happened. And even Bengals defensive back Dick Giron had no idea what was going on, saying you won't see the Pittsburgh Steelers do that again in a long time. I'll be surprised if you ever see it again. Basically, guys on both teams realized that this was just a bizarre fluke that was never supposed to happen. The rest of the season for both of these teams went how you'd expect. The Bengals continued to struggle, finishing at 4-12 before firing Homer Rice at the end of the year. Meanwhile, the Steelers erased the sour taste from the loss and went on to win their 4th Super Bowl in 6 seasons, as they defeated the Los Angeles Rams at Super Bowl 14. I made quite a few videos about that game which you can check out by clicking the playlist card in the upper right corner. And when the teams met for the rematch, the Steelers made sure that whatever happened to them on that October day wasn't going to happen here, as Pittsburgh convincingly won that game 37-17. You can learn more about the rematch by clicking the card in the upper right corner. Just to recap everything that happened, an 0-6 team that didn't score a touchdown in both meetings last season took on the hottest team in football and the defending Super Bowl champion, and that team won 34-10 and led 34-3 at one point midway through the 4th quarter. I'm not taking anything away from the Bills-Vikings game, but remember, the Bills made the playoffs the year before, and nobody was considering the Vikings to be the best team in the NFL. What the Bengals did on this day is like if the Houston Texans with Tyrod Taylor or Ryan Finley at quarterback blew out the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. That's how shocking this was. When you consider the circumstances behind this game, it might just be the most surprising blowout in the over 100-year history of the NFL. Be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed out to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaredGator9 and subscribe to 60-second NFL history on YouTube. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters who help get the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.